minutes total, okay, 5 to 7 minutes total. For the whole. I'm just trying to, so we can move it along, and if a point is made while by one of your colleagues, instead of repeating it, if that would be okay, that would be great to keep things moving. And I'm going to be watching my clock to make sure that we keep relatively good time, all right? And it's being filmed. Yeah, well.
That's the video.
Pardon me?
It told me it was cutting out half my stories. I don't want to.
Oh,
This won't be shown publicly.
this is not being shown publicly. This is being done for purposes of keeping a historical archive. And so I hope well, how can I put this? It's just a record of what was said on the discussion. How's that? Okay. So to begin, I'm going to hand the microphone down to each one of you, and I would like each of you to begin by explaining the office you held and the years you held the office. All right?
My name is Sandy Gross, and I was the Evanston City Clerk from 1977 for 2 terms until 1985. Is that all, or should I give my...
No, that's fine. Because I'm going to ask questions as we keep moving through the... I will ask
What would
questions.
you like me to do now?
Hand this microphone to Cheryl.
We're so well organized. My name is Cheryl Wollin. I was Alderman of the 7th Ward from 1989 to 1993, and Alderman of the 1st Ward, I just keep moving until I find a place that's open, from 2005 to 2009. I was elected city clerk in 1997 and for 3 terms, and took early retirement in 2008. So I served basically 11 and a half years.
Well, my term, and I've had several offices twice. Once as an alderman, and as you know, the last time as mayor. Now you're asking me to give some numbers, and I recall I was alderman from 1982 to 2001. I was mayor from 2003 to 2008.
1993.
Yeah, what did I say?
You said 2003.
No, oh, I'm sorry. But being the mayor lasted for 16 years and ended 3.5 years ago.
I'm Sue Brady, and I served as a 3rd Ward Alderman for 2 terms, 1985 to 1993.
Okay, what we can do is I'll ask the question and we can just keep moving it back and forth if that's okay with everyone.
Okay.
My first question is, why did you decide to run for elected office in Evanston?
Is this where I get to talk about my league background?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting me. I didn't have it in my notes. Go ahead, please. So that's, okay.
Okay, I'm going to do it anyhow. I joined the league in 1965, and I thought I was one of the longest term members until our table, at our dinner table, Donna Gerson is 58 years, which is quite amazing, given her youth. I joined the league in 1965. My first job when I was in Northbrook was to establish a babysitting co-op because I had 5 children and I couldn't get to a meeting unless I had babysitters. We moved to Evanston in 1972, and from the first week since we got here, I started observing the Human Services Committee for the league. And if you remember, most of you do, City Hall was right across from what is St. Mary's Church. It's now an apartment building, but it used to be an old house, and that's where City Hall was. And the Human Services Committee met in the city manager's office, and we all sat around, including the alderman, including everybody in the room, and smoked. And then went right into city council and continued smoking. I mean, the whole thing was outrageous. And we met every week. I mean, the Human Services Committee met every week. And I loved it because I got out of the house for about 2 hours once a week. In 1975, I became president of the League and served for 2 years, and I think it was almost at the height of the League's membership. We had a very large membership. I'm afraid to say how many, but it was just before everybody went back to work. And so we were very active in local action. I mean, we influenced, if not wrote, the tenant landlord ordinance, the rehab ordinance, the land use policies. And one of the committees I was on, the land use committee, Eleanor Rivella was on, and I remember thinking, she is such a beautiful, smart woman, why doesn't she ever talk? I remember that perfectly, and we know what happened to her. In 1977, like in a lot of other people, I went back to work and was sporadically active until the year 2000 when I retired. And of course, during that time, working full-time, I was an alderman for 8 years, as I announced. But what's interesting is that since 2001, I've been back in the League, being active in local government and observing. And this past Monday night, I observed the city council. So what comes around goes around. And without the League, I don't think I could have done any of the public work that I did do. And I don't think I would have ever had the confidence to run for office if I didn't have the League as a very strong part of my background. And what's fun is that now that I'm retired for a long time, it's a renewed energy. I mean, my interest in local government is strong, and it's a wonderful way to serve. And if any of you would like to join our local government committee, we meet at Jan Otwell's on the third Friday of every month at 9:30 for about an hour and a half, and we have a fun time.
Excuse me. Well, my first venture into the political arena was through an appointment by J. Lytle, the then mayor, to fill the unexpired term of the 5th Ward alderman who just quit. At that time, I was principal of Haven Middle School, and Jay came over, called and said he wanted to come to see me. And when he came, I was very surprised at what he had to say, because I think I had just reprimanded in a pretty harsh way his daughter. And I thought he was coming to raise objections to it, but I think he felt that she deserved it. Well, when he found it, I told him this wasn't, my job was Haven Middle School, and that I didn't think I would be able to attend all the meetings and all so forth. Well, he said, well, that'll be okay. Well, anyway, he talked me into it, but he says, but I want you to promise me that when the unexpired term is over, that you will run. And I don't know whether I told him yes or no, but in my mind I really had question marks. So sure enough, when the time came to run, he said, you just must get out there and run. And that's why I did. And then the successive terms came, and I ran as alderman. And then in 1989, I retired as principal of Haven, but I still had time to go in my term as alderman, which ended in 2001. And I'm at home making a scrapbook about my husband, who had passed away, to let her know what all her accomplishments of her father. And then, lo and behold, a bunch of people came to my house at somebody's urging and asked me would I run for mayor. I said, oh no way. I saw Joan Barr really, she had to work very hard and everything wasn't okay. And so they left, they came back again. Said, would I run? Again, I said no, and I said, another thing, I said, John Norwood is running, and he's a black, and I don't think it would be good to have two black people on the, running for this office. Well, they left, and incidentally, in that group was Dennis Drummer, the person who came to my house. Well, the Sunday night after Thanksgiving, they ran into my house again. Lorraine, you just have to go sit there. One of the guys, now, in retrospect, I think he was telling a big fat tale. He said, I was in Reverend Norwood's church today, and Reverend Norwood said that he was going to pull out, he was not going to run. I said, well, if he's not going to do it, then I will. Well, Norwood ran. So that's how I happened to get involved.
Do you want to know about how I became involved in the league or how I decided to run for office?
However you want to choose to, you can answer both. I mean, you have the option to answer both.
Oh, okay. Well, I joined the league when I was elected clerk. I had wanted to join earlier, but everybody in the office was a league member, and we couldn't all go to the meetings. But anyway, when I was elected, that's when I joined. I came to elective office actually as an employee at the city. 1985, my career is in written communications, marketing, advertising, copywriting, etc. kind of came to an end. And so I worked as a temp for 18 months. Worked in a law office, worked in an architecture office, investment banking, real estate, etc. Well, in 1985, I came to the city and took a job in facilities management and emergency services, and started to work on budgets. So I wanted to know more about how government really operated. So I went back to school at night. I got a master's degree in public administration. So after about four plus years there, the then city clerk, Chris Davis, had her deputy, May Inez, was retiring. And so she offered me the job as deputy city clerk. And so I took it, and everybody in the office was a member of the league. The league deputy registrars deposited their voter cards. They got the key, so I knew everybody. And so I worked there with her as her deputy for about 8 years. And one evening, it was quite late at night, and we were just in we were in the election season when the petitions are being circulated. And I wasn't quite sure what Chris was going to do, if she's going to run for office again or if she was going to say bye-bye. Well, I got a call late at night from two aldermen, Alderman Feldman and Newman, and they said, we'd like you to run for city clerk. I almost fell off the chair because I really thought Chris would run again. So, I had many discussions I talked to Jack Siegel, and I talked to my family, I talked to my friends, talked to other people who had run for office, and I thought, I knew about how the office operated. It was not glamorous, and it was not a money deal. It was modest, okay? But I don't know, I thought about it, and I said, well, why not? Why shouldn't I do this? And so that's how I made my decision to run for office. And of course, it was very late, and I was supported very heavily in the community as far as getting the signatures to get on the ballot. That's how I came to elective office.
My name is Cheryl Wollin. I joined the league in 1981, and I think this is a good membership recruitment plan. I did not plan on joining. A neighbor who I had enormous respect for and I really admired said, you know, we should get more involved in this community and we should join the league. And I thought, well, it was easy for her to say. She was single, she was working. I had a toddler, I just started teaching college. It seemed like they were giving me a new course every semester. But I admired her so much. I said, well, I'll go with you to a league meeting, but I'm not making any commitments till I see what this is about. And I was drawn in, I think, by the enormous intelligence of the women that I met with and the tough issues that they were going to tackle. And so I joined. And one of the things that has always amazed me about league members is that they are so reliable. I mean, I've been in many organizations and every PTA in town, and I've been let down many times by people who said, oh, I'll do that, I'll take care of that, and they never do. Lead people, that just didn't happen. And so the consensus meetings, the research that we did, they were really intellectually challenging, and I really enjoyed it tremendously. I served on the local board in many roles during the course of my early leagueship, but the one that I loved the most was voter service. I'm a political science teacher and a history teacher, and so voting to me was a really big deal. And I remember registering voters at a factory on Oakton Avenue during lunch. And those of you who are deputy registrars know that as soon as somebody says they're not born in the United States, you go, oh, okay, now I gotta find out. Are they a citizen? When did they become a citizen? What court? At the time you had to know the court, the date. So this man came up to me and I said, were you born in the United States? And he said, no. I said, So I tried to get this information and he said, how long are you going to be here? And I said, well, I'll be here till about 2:30, 3, the very latest. He said, will you wait for me? And I said, where are you going? And he said, he went home and he said, I'm going home to look up my papers to tell you the exact date. I said, well, of course I'll wait for you. He came back with his citizenship papers in a gold frame, and he brought his grandmother, his aunt, and his cousin, and they all had their papers in gold frames. I could just see the marks on the wall where they had taken they had obviously been hanging in their home, and every one of them registered to vote. From then on, I was hooked. I thought, this is what we do. This is our outreach to the community, and they were so grateful. And I've often told that story to my little 18-year-old students who barely, you have to blast them out of their seats to get them to vote sometimes. And I said to them, just think of how important it was to these people, and you're just taking it for granted. So at any rate, I really did get involved in voter service, and that was the thing that really enticed me. I got a call out of the blue one night from Mr. Persuasive J. Lytle, who I had never met in my life. And he said, well, I'd like you to serve on the Environmental Control Board. This is like during dinner, and I'm going, what? I said, I think you must have the wrong person, Mr. Lytle, because I have no background in science. I have no background in ecology or environmental studies. He goes, we don't need the science, we need you. And I said, oh. Well, when you put it like that. So he's very persuasive, and he talked me into doing this, and so I served for 2 years on the Environmental Control Board. I learned a lot. I used a lot of my league background in building consensus and working with people. We were a very, very compatible board, and we did our research, we did our homework, we looked at we interviewed. So we came up with this wonderful curbside recycling program. And we took it to the city council, and we presented a very fact-filled, statistical, informative presentation, and they voted it down. And I thought, what? how could they possibly not accept this wonderful plan that we had spent all these months preparing for? And so coincidentally, around the same time, Marge Collins, who I also did not know at the time, was the 7th Ward Alderman, called and said, I'd like to have lunch with you. And I thought, this is suspicious. Why? She doesn't know me. Why would you do this? And she asked if I would be willing to run for the 7th Ward. It had never dawned on me to be in elected office. She was very persuasive. I talked to her. She said, well, just talk to Jake, who was the retiring 7th Ward Alderman. And so Jake said his one little line, I remember, he goes, well, here's your chance. You want that curbside recycling program, don't you? I said, well, yeah, I do, but he goes, well, you could be a vote. And I said, well, that's true, I could. I said, but I've never run for office. I've taught political science, but I never pictured myself in the role. And he assured me that there would be lots of help and lots of guidance, and so I was elected the first time in the spring of 1989. There were 2 aldermen per ward. And Marge Collins was the other alderman that I served with. So that's the beginning of this.
Not 1989.
1989, I was elected.
Oh, okay, all right, for the first time.
For the first time, yeah. We don't have time for the whole.
I guess I go back the furthest. I moved to Evanston in 1962, so this is year 50, and I joined the League, like you, Cheryl, at the urging of my good friend and neighbor, Judy Wilson-Wyden, who became president of this Evanston League eventually. But I can remember when she said, Sandy, you should join the League of Women Voters. And I said, League of Women Voters? That sounds like an organization for my mother. I did join. And this was the mid-60s. Lyndon Johnson was president. We were all studying the war on poverty and learning about the maximum feasible participation of the poor. And at some point, they asked me if I would edit the 1970 edition of This Is Evanston. I want to mention 3 things. I said if I had a title for these remarks, it would be "The League Made Me Do It." And the 3 things I want to tell you about quickly, I hope, are This Is Evanston, the Plan Commission, which I served on and which was an outgrowth of my editing This Is Evanston, and finally chairing something called the Civic Center Committee. And I'll try to quickly explain how all these have to do with the League of Women Voters. Well, when asked to edit, I don't know who the new editor is, but at any rate, I'm an English teacher, so of course, what's to edit a book, right? You just know grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and there you have it. I had no idea that I was chair of 30 people who had all these subcommittees doing research on Evanston history, schools, everything. And I learned so much about the city, and we were very proud of the finished product, and we were invited to present it to the aldermen. At that time, the city manager was Wayne Anderson, and he had helped us. He was very cooperative with the League's project of This Is Evanston, and the mayor was Ed Vanneman. And this is now 1970, and we presented our book, This Is Evanston, to the City Council, and it was given to them with very nice words by City Manager Wayne Anderson. And a few days later, a few weeks later, I got a call from Ed Vanneman, who by this time had read our wonderful publication, and he invited me to serve on the Plan Commission. And I did. And the Plan Commission was more knowledge about Evanston, this time zoning, planning, land use, transportation. I really knew a lot about Evanston. And while I was serving on the Plan Commission, Ed Vanneman called again and asked if I would chair the Civic Center Committee. And the city was at that time at 1501 Oak across from St. Mary's, and it was a former country club, and it was much too small. The recreation department, the health department, everything was spread out, and they wanted to consolidate. And so he asked me to chair a committee that consisted of 4 aldermen, Connie Fitzsimmons, Marty Garrity, Jim Staples, and John Wyant. and one other Plan Commission person, Al Roop. So the six, and I was chair, and we were from different parts of town, and we were different politically, but we all shared a dislike, to put a kind word on it, of Marywood, which was a candidate for our movement. And the reason I mention at the League of Women Voters is that as chair of the Civic Center Committee, I conducted, or we, the committee conducted, a league-like study. We did a lot of research, we gathered facts, we gathered evidence, and like the building or not, it made a lot of sense. And we wrote up our report, and we presented it to the city council, and the mayor called me right away. He was extremely impressed with the work we had done. It was league-like work, and the council approved it. Anyway, at this point, having edited This is Evanston, having served on the Plan Commission, having chaired a council committee, I was very much involved in Evanston. And my kids now were in school all day, and rather than go back to school as a high school English teacher, which I could have done and had done in the past and had enjoyed it, I thought, I really want to work for Evanston. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I'm going to say it. I was leaving a council meeting one evening. It was in the old building, and I walked out with Ed Morton. By then, he was the new city manager. And I said, Ed, I'm ready to go to work. Is there a job opening in City Hall? He said, you should run for city clerk. Maury's not running for re-election. Maury Brown was a 20-year city clerk that preceded me. Well, it had never, ever entered my mind. But after a little consultation with my husband and some friends and all, I did. That's how I came to run for city clerk.
Great. All right. The next question is, what was the most striking aspect of the election process when you ran for office?
All right, I'll start with that. And this is the 2-minute limit or less.
Yeah.
You can shut me up or turn me off whenever. The one thing, well, it's very hard to run citywide. Evanston's a pretty big place. We needed 1,600 signatures just to get on the ballot. That means a ward organization. So that's really one very striking thing was how hard it is. Another thing was how many people worked for me. It was, you just put yourself out there, and it's remarkable how people emerge. The other, I guess, another very striking thing was how narrowly I won. There were 17,000 people who voted in that election, and I won by 300 votes. So it was a really tough election. This is what I took out of a letter that I wrote to all the workers as the campaign was winding down. It was getting close to election day, and I wanted to thank everybody. I said, by the time we vote, I will have appeared at 25 coffees, spoken before 3 retirement homes, the Reba Fellowship, the Kiwanis Club, and the Northwest Homeowners Association, participated in the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum, appeared on radio stations at WNUR and WEAW, and been interviewed by the Evanston Review and the Independent Voters of Illinois. In between, I was out ringing doorbells. I have more stories about running, but you know, we don't want to be here all night.
I do think for a first-time candidate, there are 2 issues that are daunting. First of all, the financial implications of running a campaign. I mean, we're not talking about super PACs, but it does take money, and I didn't have very much, and I wasn't well-funded personally. And people kept saying, don't worry about that, Cheryl, don't worry about that. And I thought, I worry about that all the time. And the second thing was that there is such a wide, diverse issue packet that you really have to know. And there are so many issues. As I mentioned, I was steeped in garbage and landfill and stuff, but there's so much else that I needed to realize. And so I really tried very hard to learn the different issues and be prepared for all the, as Sandy said, all the debates and the public performances and the invitations to luncheons. But my first debate was, and I don't, it might have been a league debate, I don't know, it was on the stage of Haven School. And I felt pretty confident. First of all, I taught at Haven for 7 years, so I knew the stage really well. And that auditorium, I could keep squirmy kids in their seats, so I thought I could do this. And I had really studied. I had studied more than I think I can ever remember studying. So the first question was, now, what is your position on rehabilitation of the animals used in Northwestern's laboratory experiments? Well, I wasn't prepared for that one. And I have a very visual mind, so I pictured in my head like little cats on crutches and how they would be going through physical therapy. And then it dawned on me that the city has absolutely no power of regulation. And I said, well, the National Institute of Health takes care of that. The city does not monitor those. And after that question, the rest of them were a piece of cake. The rest of them I was prepared for. The second thing I think that was daunting was the doorbell ringing, the going door to door. I know how much I resented when I was making meatballs for dinner to have the doorbell ring and some stranger be at the door. So I really felt I was intruding on people's family time, and it took a lot of willpower and courage to get out there and do it. However, my campaign manager said to me, you're not thinking about it correctly. And I said, really? And she said, you're giving the people the opportunity to meet the candidate. Well, it didn't help a lot, but I did do it. And I do think that, getting out and meeting the people in the community was a huge bonus part of running for office.
Well, I just want to echo Sandy's remarks about the number of people that are involved in a citywide election. And as I told you, my entry as an elected official, as a nominee, I was really lifted along by a whole bunch of people in this community. And I did not campaign as my colleagues here did, but I was just amazed at what you must do, and it must be accurate, on time, and just the generosity of people in the community that have faith in a person like myself. So.
Thank you. Well, I suppose that I'm probably the only one up here that's had to run for elective office when we had 18 aldermen. 2 from who? I wasn't who? You didn't run. All of yes, you did. This group here. And then the second time, of course, we knew that being the mayor, that it was going to be changed to just what we have today. But I think I don't have maybe the best feeling toward running for office, particularly when we had 18 aldermen. I thought it was a great waste of time. In a community where you have 74,000 or 75,000 people, and you're divided into wards, and you're just going out battling with each other to who's going to be elected. I thought that we probably could have used that time with some seminars on how to be a good alderman, or something else could have been going on at the time that would have been a benefit to the community. Now, running for office for mayor was the joy of my life. At that time, I just had such wonderful people who helped me. There was a building downtown that the owner of it let us rent. No, we didn't rent. Let us use that building. It was huge, and the people who had been in there before forgot and left the telephones in. And and they were working, so we didn't have to pay for a telephone. And then there were tables there. Everything that you wanted was there. And I received such support from so many people. I think that did something for me. It let me know what good people we have here in Evanston and how supportive they can be and run things for you. I'm looking at Helen. Helen was the one that did my first brochure back when I was running for office. It's where she knew how to do it, and I thought that was a wonderful thing. But you know, when you've been through two types of, there's a different number of people on the council, and you've gotten older, you view things just a little bit differently. And you can see how that we might have been able, back in the days when we had 18, that we could have utilized the resources of the people who ran for office, who just have had all kinds of experience. But instead we wasted our time with a charade of going to just speaking to people in the wards where we were, and then being introduced to how people can do things during the election process. I remember there was one church in the 5th Ward that they had trouble with because all kinds of fancy things were going on down there. So I just thought it could have been better. So I really didn't particularly feel that that was the way. Now, I just have to say this and I'm going to stop. And you know, I've said to a friend of mine, after having all the experience that I had, that I wish I had Mayor Daley's power just for 6 months. 6 months, you would have seen a change.
We are so old up here. It's just I mean, my daughter ran for mayor of Portland, Oregon, and the election was last week, and she lost in the primary. But the election that she ran was wonderful and beautiful, and I'm so proud of her. But it's so different than it was when any of us ran for office ourselves. I mean, it has no bearing on reality. And so to talk about our experiences for anyone who's interested in running, it's as different as night and day. But having said that, I have a few tiny, just picking up on what Lorraine said, I bet everybody who was around in this room supported retention of the 18-member council. I mean, I know most of you did. And I was among you. I have to tell you, we were wrong. Lorraine is right. Whether 9 is the right number, I'm not sure. I happen to think 2 aldermen from 6 wards would be 12 in total, would probably be the most beneficial. But 18 was a large council. The obvious advantage is that you had a partner to solve problems and do research with. In terms of the electoral process, I have to say 2 words in terms of at least the 3rd ward, and that is L.B. Lauterbach, who is still with us over at the Mather. And you did not do anything in the 3rd ward without L.B. and Ned's approval. Ned was a former alderman also. And she made you knock on doors. And it didn't make any difference whether you had opposition or not. You had to go out and knock on doors. And as long as this isn't going to go public, my first opponent for my first election was a man named Lee Lickentritt. I'll never forget his name. And no one knew him. I certainly didn't know him. And Albie made me go out and knock on door after door after door. And when the election results came in, he got 25% of the vote. And to this day, I don't know what I did wrong before I had cast a vote to have 25% of the people vote against me. But running for public office is not fun. You have to love public policy, whatever level of government you're interested in. But the electoral election campaign, except for a very few, is difficult, and I'm not sure in today's age whether it's better or worse, but it's certainly different.
Okay, thank you on your comments so far. The next question is, what surprised you about the actual work of the position? Yeah, you know.
What surprised me was how important constituent issues were. And the big issues that occurred when I served, and I served with Beth Davis for the entire 8 years, were the development of the research park and the revision of the zoning ordinance. Two huge, huge endeavors. And they took every ounce of time that we had, and I was working, of course, all this time, and there wasn't a Monday night or a Wednesday night that we weren't meeting on one or the other. But what surprised me was, as enjoyable as they were, and as hard as they were, and as necessary as they were, what surprised me was the rewards you got from serving constituents. And I was thinking about this, and one of the biggest things I could think of is the tiniest thing, and that is that we were able to reserve, I forget, 10 parking spaces in the Chicago Avenue garage right across or next to Jewel for shoppers. And I just took great pride in that we were able to do something for our constituents. So in terms of, I think the other part of it was just satisfaction or two things. Late hours, which, I mean, we never got out of there 1 o'clock in the morning, and most of us were working. It was very, very hard. And the other thing that was very dissatisfying was the number of aldermen who were not prepared. And that was very defeating, because you needed to be prepared in order to participate in these weighty discussions. But on balance, it's the people who made the difference. In terms of, I think the other part of it was just satisfaction or two things. Late hours, which, I mean, we never got out of there 1 o'clock in the morning, and most of us were working. It was very, very hard. And the other thing that was very dissatisfying was the number of aldermen who were not prepared. And that was very defeating, because you needed to be prepared in order to participate in these weighty discussions. But on balance, it's the people who made the difference.
Well, one of the most surprising things for me as a mayor was to learn that I was a liquor commissioner. Nobody had ever mentioned anything to me about the mayor being a liquor commissioner, and that was by law. And when I found out that that was a responsibility, I had to begin to read and whatnot to get myself to know. And I found that I just didn't have enough information in the office. It just wasn't there. And so I had to send off and get off, because that was a position that was mandated by the state, not by the city. And so to become informed about what my responsibilities were, because it was a responsibility that a decision wasn't made by the council. The decision was made by the mayor. And you know I didn't want to make a bad decision. And when people would come before well, we had an advisory committee, and that advisory committee, on it, we had people who had, I guess, had been in it for as long as it had been a liquor commission. And they were valuable to me, very valuable, because they had knowledge. But, you know, time takes us all out, so they weren't able to stay there all that time. And then one of the things that I found a little disconcerting was that many people who came before the Liquor Commission and wanted to, open up a place with liquor, some of them were very unrealistic. And with my not knowing so much, I had, I guess, an innocence about it. So I would ask them, do you think you're gonna make it in a little place like that? With the liquor? Oh yes, oh yes. Sure, I'm sure that I can make, and then to be in office long enough to see those very people fold. It was a very tragic experience for me.
I don't want to take up too much time. Okay. I think it probably shouldn't have been surprising, but it was surprising to me, was the amount of change that went on in that office, in that city clerk's office. Just in the realm of elections, we started out and we would be 6 deep at the counter registering voters when we got near the deadline on registration. We had absentee voting in the office, and we'd have throngs of people doing that, coming in. And then on election day, I would take the absentee ballots to the 75 precincts. I mean, it was really work. Well, then, the legislature changed the law, and you could, if you could register the driver's facility, or you could register in a social service place, and they kept changing the method of election. We had little cards, and then we got big sheets, and that would cut your fingers. I mean, it was just incredible the amount of change in the process to do the election. Finally, early voting came in, and so people could, go and vote early. They'd have 2 days for absentee voting, and then election day. And so that changed a great deal. In addition to that, the clerk's office was the place where freedom of information requests go, and that's still true to this day. And that can be quite a job, because they come in, you got to get them from the department, then you've got to notify, and it's timed by law. So the work is varied and changing. But I must say, I think the elections are a lot smoother today because of the changes that were made.
What surprised me the most was the Friday nights when this poor man would develop and come to deliver this huge, voluminous packet. Sometimes not till 9 o'clock on Friday night for Monday night's meeting. There was your weekend. It was gone. I never really felt that I could vote on something that if I hadn't read everything. So, and it might have been just because I was new, but and I'm sure there were aldermen who thought they could wing it, but for every yes vote on the consent agenda, that took about 2 minutes, there were about 10 hours of reading and preparation and phone calls and research to be sure I understood what I was voting on. I was determined never to vote for something I didn't understand. And so it took me maybe longer than other people, but because they were more familiar with the issues or the procedures, or they didn't care. But personally, I felt I needed to digest it all. So it was an enormous amount of work. It was satisfying, obviously, as Sue said, to see projects go forward and to be completed, but it really does take a great deal of reading if you're doing it right. In my first term as an alderman, there were 18 members, and I was very lucky and fortunate to have two wonderful partners, first Marge Collins and then Steve Engelman, for the 4 years that I served the first time. It was easier to share the burden, to talk about constituent needs, to go through plans, to cover each other. If Steve had to be in court, or I had to, or one of us was out of town, it really did seem to make the job easier to have somebody that understood it. And also the fact that there was a wonderful camaraderie, especially among most, not all, but most of the women that were on the council. I remember Joe Campo saying once to me, "Don't you feel like it's a little bit like there are too many women on the council?" And I said, "You should be so lucky, Joe, to have this many people working for your city." The second time, the 12 years later, when I ran again, God knows why, there were only 9 aldermen. And I did feel the difference in the workload. I really did feel that the responsibility, and it was a different ward as well, but the responsibility was solely on my shoulders. There was less camaraderie on the council the second time. You had to work for it, you could develop it. Who knew that Ann Rainey was going to be my best friend? I didn't know that when I started. And in fact, you really did have to work together if you really wanted to get things done. And I do think that you're probably right, it's probably more efficient, and it's probably better. But I do think that the workload, at least it seemed harder to achieve what we wanted to achieve the second time around. But that could just be me.
I just have to interrupt and make one comment from my observing city council on Monday night. 25 years or longer, employees were honored, and in addition, Ann Rainey was honored for being on the city council for 25 years.
She was on when I was city clerk.
Isn't that
I'm telling
amazing?
you.
And she does her homework.
I know, and she does.
What surprised me about the actual work of the position is how much I loved it. It was a turn on to wake up in the morning and go to that office. I was the first woman to be elected citywide. I was the only full-time elected official in City Hall. I'm council manager, everybody else's staff appointed by the manager. I also, I should give credit to the young woman who ran for city clerk 4 years before me. She didn't win. Her name was Bonnie Hartenstein, and she shed a lot of light on the office and shook things up. So when I ran on a platform to increase in voter registration, to make the office more user-friendly. Anyway, I had a lot of work to do. At that time, we did not have consolidation of elections, and I was the administrator. I ran the election, which meant I had to get the judges, the polling places, train them, get the ballots printed, accept the petitions. It was a huge job, but I enlisted my family and and we did it. We took on the recodification of the city code, which was a huge undertaking, and we did that. We inaugurated something called a new resident information packet, and so when people came in to register to vote, we would give them this little plastic bag that the Chamber of Commerce paid for, and in it were a list of their aldermen and whatever. It was a nice little service. I don't know if you still do it or not, but I also said that I would keep the office open one evening a week to make it easier for people who work to come in and register to vote. And in addition to doing these massive voter registrations at the high school and university. But let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to say something about running the local election. In the middle of my office, my first term, the state passed the consolidation of elections law, which took away the power of the local clerk. When I first ran, the question I would get most frequently was, shouldn't a clerk be appointed. Why do you need to be elected? You're not a policymaker. And at that time, when the clerk ran the elections, it was the reason I was elected. It was so that the person administering the election wasn't part of I was independent, and that was the reason. So now that when they consolidated elections, and the county clerk was going to do it, why should I feel that the office should remain elective? Well, it's a subtle thing I'll try to explain, but in City Hall, when you're elected and you're working with the staff that are carrying out the policies of the alderman and the will of the city manager, you're independent. First day in office, there were a parade of department heads that came into my office because they knew that the manager supported me and had encouraged me to run, and so I was a liaison or a go-between the staff and the city manager. I was also a go-between some of the older staff members who put their arms around the new young women employees and called them honey and dear, and their outrage. What do I want to say? I want to say that I would urge that the office remain elected so that there is someone in City Hall who is not beholden to the city manager. I had a wonderful relationship with Ed Morton. He invited me to go to staff meetings. Do you do that? And so we always knew what was happening at in City Hall. In our office, we could be ombudsman, we could answer questions, and I think I've gone way over my time. What's the next question?
The last question is, would you have any advice for those who may at some point consider...
Yeah, that's enough, it's too long.
You
It's fine.
skipped one.
No,
I
that's
skipped
fine.
one. I said, well, some people answered it when they were answering. So, greatest satisfactions and disappointments.
Well, I think you should go to the last question.
Yeah, I would like to go to the last question. So, any advice for those who may consider running for office?
I'll be very brief and say I have a box in my attic, 2 of them with scrapbooks. Anybody interested in running? I can just tell you how to go from point A to point Z.
Well, I just wanted to say my greatest satisfaction first, my first term, and then I'll go, because mine is very short as well at the end. And that was, without a doubt, without a single doubt in my mind, when I saw this question, it was serving on the Finance and Capital building for the new library. I still call it the new library, even though the grand opening was in 1994, and I organized that party. We were determined to look at what librarians wanted. We had the design competition. We worked with a young architect, Joseph Powell, who had never designed a big building before in his life. He won the blind competition. We got together, we worked, we followed that construction. The demolition, we awarded a certain amount of money, budgeted that, and Max Rubin called and said we just pushed it and it fell down. We saved a lot of money there, Cheryl. I was teaching one day, there was a knock on the door at the college, and the secretary said, someone from the city needs to speak to you immediately. That never happens. People don't interrupt your classes when you're teaching. And I said, really? They have to talk to me right now? She said, yeah, they sounded really, really like they had to talk to you right now. Well, the demolition went smoothly, the construction was underway, they dug the hole, and we hit water. And it was Max, and he said, we hit water, Cheryl. I said, well, that wasn't in the plan, was it? He said, no. I said, we can't go down into the water. So the garage was altered a little bit. It's a little bit higher than it was going to be. We worked so hard on that library that we came in on time, under budget, and I still think I love to walk through that library. It is used by everybody in Evanston. I love the new children's room. I didn't tell anybody about the underground parking for quite a few years because I like to have a spot there when I came. It is, I think, something we can really, really be proud of. But to see a project from the beginning, from concept to grant to opening, and even now, you know, all these years later, whatever that is, 12, 6, 18 years later, it is still functioning, I think, quite extremely well. So that was my greatest satisfaction. If you want to run, I think you know, I don't wait for somebody to, well, I did that, I admit. I waited for people to invite me to do things, but don't wait for people. If you feel you have something to contribute, and certainly the league is committed to public service, you know, put yourself out there, nominate yourself, get ready to run, and get to know the community. Reach out beyond your comfort zone. Get to know all the not-for-profits in town that help the youth and schools and seniors and the arts. That's all part of the city. And it is a fantastic city. I am so proud to say that I'm from Evanston. And I've gone to National League of Cities meetings, I've gone to NEA meetings, national meetings, and that really does make me feel proud to say I'm from the city of Evanston.
Very briefly on satisfactions and disappointments. Really my satisfactions were helping people. Helping people to register to vote, as Cheryl said, who had just become citizens. It just made me weep with joy because this is such a great country. The other thing is assisting people who were handicapped, providing notary services to people in their homes that they couldn't get out. My big disappointment was when the legislature took the city clerks off of the firefighter pension boards. I was on the pension board for a number of years. It's fascinating how they invested the money, how the men, they were all men at the time, came in who were disabled, wanting a pension, because firefighting is a very physical activity. And I learned so much, and it was really sad to give that up. And I don't have much advice, but it would be considered the amount of time that you will spend in public office, because I love to read, and my reading was very diminished. I mean, I'm talking about my pleasure reading, you know, but I would just say two things. Listen to people and question. Do a lot of questioning.
Well, to any young alderman who will listen to me, my first thing is be sure when you leave that office as alderman or whatever it is, that you are regarded as the same person you were when you were running for office. Be yourself. You see, if you start playing politics, you better have a big memory, because you in the political thing, you say what is expedient, not necessarily what is true. The second thing I'd like to briefly say is give credit to those people to whom credit is due. I still feel bad about this. Before, as an example, before I went into office early as an alderman, Jay Lytle told me of what all he had done to get the transportation center, and he was hoping that it would all be up and running during his term. And Joan Barr followed him, as I think most of you know. He also talked about the library and his desire to see the library built. And at that time I had been on a committee dealing with the library, and had gone to the U.S. Conference of Public Information in Washington, D.C. from the city and represent the library. But when that library was completed, and when that transportation center was completed, my name was up there on the wall in both of them. You know, that hurt me, because I knew I had nothing to do with that. This was something that came under previous administrators. So over the years, while I was in office, usually if the occasion arose where I could tell it, I would tell people, my name shouldn't be there. By no means should it have been there. I didn't initiate it, I had nothing to do with it. And the other factor is this. When people talk about, well, of course the city has, really grown during these recent years. But that was due to a vote of 5 aldermen. It wasn't due to any one person. One person may have the idea, and one alderman may try to, persuade all these other aldermen to vote with them. I understand all of that. But the final thing is, nothing would have happened if it had not been for a vote of 5 people. So I have to say to people, when they want to give credit to certain ones, or even to me, I said, no, nothing would have happened if it hadn't been for the vote of the council. And I think everybody should give credit to those people who devote themselves to doing what is best for the community and stand up and vote for it. And finally, I am so pleased that the relationship with Northwestern has grown for the better. I found in running for office and going and talking to people that all of this negativism just wasn't there. When I went to meetings, people were not against Northwest. So then I realized that negativism was coming from very vocal people, not necessarily the masses in the community. And I feel real good about it. So I'd say to anybody running for office, be fair. Do your homework. Do your homework. And then when you do your homework and you make a decision, your decision may be wrong. But at least you made that decision in very good faith, and you don't need a very good memory.
Well, not to repeat what everyone has said before, let me take 30 seconds and just tell you what life is like now. It's very different on city council. And not only are there just 9 members, but each of them have their own laptop, and the firemen do not deliver packets on Friday nights or Thursday nights. And it appears that very few of them print out any hard copies, unless maybe it's a particular issue that they're following, they might. But they are all sitting there with their laptops. Very different.
Paid by the city.
Everything paid for by the city, but a proper expense, I think. I mean, if the teachers and the students and the schools can get them as they approved on last Monday night at the District 65 School Board meeting, the aldermen, I guess, should have them too. Secondly, everything is on television. Not only is the City Council on television, the 3 standing committees, Administration and Public Works, Human Services, Planning and Development, the Rules Committee, and I believe most of the zoning committees. So Jesse, isn't that right? So important land use decisions are also on television. And that makes a huge difference in terms of following what's happening in the city government. The whole program of 311, and I'm sure many of you have used that service, though the alderman fought it rather harshly. I, for one, think it's been a big success and is going to make a big difference in terms of customer service. I happened, because we're having new curbs put in, to call last week, and I had the head of the engineering department, they didn't know if I was anybody, call me back within 48 hours. I mean, they do, there is efficiency now that there was not before. There is more transparency, there's more availability, and lastly, but not leastly, is by and large, the aldermen all seem to be getting along. As far as I know.
Let's see if I can do this without strangling anyone. Let's see if I have to go all the way down. It would be the worst thing to have happen after all this hard work.
So I want to thank all of our presenters this evening, and I want to also remind people that in September, the Evanston Community Foundation's Public Service Challenge will start its work in encouraging people to run for public office. And so I want to hope that those of you who have been here tonight and who have heard the words of wisdom of our elected officers in Evanston can share that knowledge with others, and will hopefully get the report from what was said in a form that could potentially be put in an article in the Evanston Roundtable, because I'm consistently believing that it's important to have our message out in the community about the work of the league and the success that we have. And I think that this has just been a shining example of your individual dedication to the city of Evanston, and to hear your stories has been extremely rewarding. And I thank all of you very much for your time and your effort, and I thank all of you for coming this evening. And I'd like to remind you also, someone when they leave, and if I would like to think that perhaps our speakers could get one of the table arrangements so you have something to take with you.
Very nice.
Yes, so I want to have everyone once again applaud our contributors. And the only thing I will have left to say is that I would like to have the board members stick around for just a few minutes so we can get a quick picture. And the rest of you, I'll see you during the summer, and whenever, I'll look forward to hearing from you, and thank you again for being a member of the league.